Very welcome to this talk. I'm Dolores Andrew-Gavin and I'm a business clarity coach, and I work through my website Celtic Soul Lessons. So today I'm talking about the subject of business clarity coaching, how to overcome anxiety and stress. So whether you're here today as a managing director, an employee, or as someone that wants to change career, I think the most important thing that we can do is to become clear on who we are ourselves. And one of the ways to do this is looking at our stories around anxiety and stress. So first of all, anxiety. Anxiety is a fear of something that hasn't yet happened. We can have anxiety over many different things, and especially when it comes to perhaps changing career, if that's something we're doing right now, or if we're looking at even what course we want to do. We might be anxious about it, we're fearful of it. And stress as well can manifest in many different ways. And sometimes stress as well is a fear of doing something. So it's looking at this, what is fear? What is this thing, fear, that stops us in so many ways, or what makes us being anxious? So what fear is an instinctual emotion. It's that fight, flight, or freeze response we get to a situation that comes up for us. And what then is an emotion? An emotion is a piece of energy, and energy wants to flow. And I think when we look at emotions for what they are, we can really have a better relationship with them, because people might say, well, that person is a very anxious person, but really we want to not have that kind of self-talk that as an anxious person. We want to realise that an emotion is energy in motion. E for energy, and motion wants to flow. So our energy, our emotions, they flow through us. Something happens, we get fearful, and then we go, ooh, it's okay. You know, we allow it to flow. It's only when we get stuck in constant fear of going forward that we can maybe start a loop of being anxious about one thing, so much so that we can start to become anxious about everything. That's in its most extreme state. So when we put that distance, as I say, between what an emotion actually is, it kind of brings us a bit more into good relationship with what an emotion is, a messenger molecule. Stress, looking at stress then for what that is, stress isn't tangible. We can't pick it up or look at it, but we can feel it. We feel stress in our bodies. We might feel it in our shoulders, we might feel it in our stomach, which is an area that we often feel stress in. You know, we might get butterflies in our tummy when we get stressed. And with anxiety as well, what we'll feel is we might get sweaty hands, or our heart might start beating. There again, these are just the outward manifestations of what it is when we hold on to our emotions. So one of the best things we can do, step number one, I guess, in becoming clear on our mindset, is to examine which emotion comes up for us most. Is it anxiety or another? And then looking at stress again, asking ourselves, what is my stress story? If stress is something that's coming up for us, what's your relationships with stress in your life? Might sound like a funny question to ask, but we hold on to our stories so tightly at times. And it's going to challenge the premise of our story. You know, why am I stressed about this? Because sometimes the truth we're holding on to in relation to our story isn't actually a truth, really. It's just something that we have told ourselves so often that we believe it and we hold tightly to it. But we can actually change those stories that we tell when we challenge them. We can just look a little bit deeper at them and a little lean into them. I always say lean into our stories. So becoming clear on your stress story, write it down. Much better sometimes than taking out the laptop and typing is get a pen and paper, go back to the old-fashioned way and get the pistons in the brain moving, because when we start to write, it's really coming from a different place than when we sit at the laptop and we're trying to think of what we're going to type. When we write, it just flows. So we can really come into a relationship with the stories we tell ourselves around things that we feel more negative about. But of course, nothing really is negative as such. It's just our perception, our stress story, our anxiety story. But the next thing I'd like to talk about, number 3, will be our value system. So we all have our own innate values that we hold strongly to, but we can find sometimes, if anyone wants to sit up here, more than welcome. Sometimes we're coming from not our own values in life. We're actually coming from value system that we may have taken up from our parents, our caregivers, and for no negative reasons there again. If our parents thought, had a certain value system and we just learned that, we may have taken them on, even though we may find that they're not in alignment with our own value systems. So it's really leaning in, and of course there again it's no guilt or no shame and nothing on the mummies and daddies. We just all have different value systems, and sometimes we hold on to value systems that can be societal, and there again they may not be in alignment with our own self. So this is really going inward again and learning more about ourselves and our own journey through life, and how we can become, stuck in emotions, stuck in our story, and stuck with our own value system. So we can feel then when we're not in alignment. You might say, okay, so how do I know if my values aren't my values? You'll just feel more out of alignment with life. You might become frustrated. You might be in a job and you might be frustrated at it. You mightn't know why you feel frustrated. It just doesn't seem to flow. You don't bounce out of bed and go, yay, I'd like to go to work today, even though that doesn't happen every day to everyone anyway. But you're just going to have more questions. You're going to feel that there must be more to life than this. There'll be all this niggling at you, when you're not going forward, coming from your own core beliefs and values. So how do we turn this around? How do we become more clear and make sure that, we're looking at ourselves and our emotions and using them for what they're meant for, there again as messengers, molecules, as I said. So, looking at the excuses we give in relation to what we do in our life and where we're challenged is a great start, because our excuses that we give are often masquerading as the limiting beliefs that we hold on to. And a limiting belief basically is just a belief we have, a story we're telling ourselves, but it's limiting us. And of course, the biggest one that we can suffer from, and I'm sure we all have from time to time, is our feelings of self-worth around ourselves. Oh, I'm not good enough. How could I do that? No one will want to hear me, what I have to say. All these things we say, I can't, because they're limiting. It's our self-talk. And when our self-talk is more negative, it's the story we're believing. We're believing we're not good enough. And it's where our energy is going to come from. And we're going to be stuck there unless we make a conscious decision to change the story. And we can do this by challenging. I always like to challenge the premise of a story and, say to people, why, challenge them around their self-worth issues. What proof have you? Because usually, we don't really have the proof. It's just a limiting belief we hold on so tightly to. We may be in a job that doesn't suit us, and we may say, well, can't you see that I'm in this job and it's not going well for me? But maybe the job doesn't suit you, and you need to look at your beliefs around it and think, well, what do I actually want to do? How can I change this? If I'm stressed, if I'm frustrated in where I am, what do I need to change right now? And not delve so much and believe and be invested so much in the limiting beliefs we put on ourselves. Because as I say, they can be quite destructive. We want to always turn those limiting beliefs on their head and challenge them. And self-worth, I think, and a sense of belonging are really areas of our life that we're not taught a lot about at school from a young age. There's a lot of peer pressure to be a certain way, there's a lot of societal pressure to be a certain way, but ourselves as people, we may then try to fit in instead of feeling like we belong. And when we try to fit in, even saying that, it's like we have to contort ourselves and change ourselves a little bit to fit in, instead of just being the people who we are ourselves. And this really, looking at all these topics can become really clear and get clarity around our mindset for our business. And even if it's, even if you're here and you're wondering, maybe I'd like to change now, and oh gosh, maybe I'm too old, or maybe I'm too young. They're all, again, just questions that we can turn upside down and really challenge them. And we can always have a choice, and I think that's the big thing, is that everything we say, every excuse we make, every limiting belief we come to, we can challenge it, and we can find out as well where it had its origins. Oftentimes we develop our limiting beliefs from a very, very young age, when we haven't developed the emotional intelligence to actually decipher for ourselves the truth and untruth of a situation. We may have been told by a teacher, unwittingly, that, oh, you'll never make it with maths, you're not very good at that way. And it may have been just an off-the-cuff remark, but we could have taken that statement, held it, stored it, and then have a limiting belief that I'm never going to be any good at maths. So we get those beliefs so young, and as I say, at an early age, we just don't have the emotional intelligence to kind of go, you know what, I can be good at maths if I try harder. It's a story again, it's the stories we tell ourselves, and our stories that we hold on to always have emotions attached to them, as well as the anxieties and the stresses. Like, what is stress, as I said already, it can mean so many different things to so many different people. And oftentimes emotions like anger is another emotion that we can hold on very strongly to. But anger turned inward is depression. And we certainly don't want to hold on to things like anger if we don't need to. We can look at our mindset around our stories and we can change them. We may be angry, we may feel angry towards someone who we feel may be trying to take our power away from us. We may feel as though we're in a job, and we may feel as though somebody is not allowing us to do something, as though they're taking our power. Anger will always come up to stop us and say, my personal boundary is being rattled here, I'm not standing in my power. So it's leaning into the anger and seeing, what is it telling me? It's very much about this going deep, asking ourselves, challenging ourselves, empowering ourselves, because when we make the courageous journey of going inward and asking these questions of ourselves, we're the only people that can change ourselves. And somebody can give us a helping hand, they can give us the questions, but really it's up to ourselves to do the work on ourselves. And that can take courage as well. And we may not be let's say it might not feel like the right time. And if we say that it's not the right time, what excuse there again is it? Because is it ever the right time? What excuse you give yourself? You might say, sure, I'm 30 now, I'm too old. But when you're 40, you're going to be 10 years older. And you might say, I should have done it when I was 30. But you're only 40. It doesn't really matter, it's just a story, and it's just a number. It's really about, I really try to help people empower themselves to not fall victim to the stories they tell themselves, and especially to deal with anxiety, I think, which is going to be quite epidemic in a lot of ways, where a lot of people seem to suffer from anxiety, but to realise that yes, it's a very valid and it's a very valid emotion to feel. We can turn it on our head if it's something to do with what we're telling ourselves, and it's just about. And another thing is that somebody else will always tell you. Someone else can always see the truth, and we probably know that at times when someone will say something to us, they'll tell us the real truth of the situation, and we might kind of go, wow, where did that come from? Because we're so invested in our own stories at times, we need other people. But of course we don't always want to hear that either. We might take it on board as someone criticising us. But it's always good to listen to what people say to us. It doesn't mean we have to allow their judgment of us define us. It's just about listening sometimes, because there might be a little gem of wisdom in what someone has to say to us. We don't have to take it on board though. But it's good to listen. My children love a movie called The Penguins of Madagascar. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. I see some nods. So the Penguins of Madagascar have a great one, and they say, smile and wave, boys, smile and wave. So why I say that is sometimes we can listen to what people are saying to us, but we don't have to take on what they're saying. We can listen, but we can learn sometimes too from what people are saying to us, but just not letting it define us. Also, you yourself as a person has the right to take on other people's judgment. You don't have to and it could be a well-meaning person there again telling us something, but if you know it isn't alignment with yourself, you don't have to take on board other people's stories about us. Because always remember, if someone has an opinion about you, it's their opinion, and it's also coming from their limiting beliefs. So if we allow ourselves to live our lives with what somebody else says to us, we're giving them our power away, and we're letting them decide our choices. So I think it can be quite empowering for people to hear that at times, that we actually do have the ability to reel back in these stories we have about ourselves. Now sometimes actually too, we have to accept things for the way they are. You know, we can't change everything right away. And sometimes, especially if we're a mom of children, you know, we might need our children to work a certain way in order for them to be safe, let's say. But as we get older, we can begin to unravel and to realise that we can stand on our own 2 feet. We can become assertive, which is very different dynamic to being aggressive. There's assertiveness, there's aggressiveness, and there's passive aggressiveness. 3 quite interesting ways that we handle our power. When we're passive aggressive, we do something, but we might be saying, why does everybody ask me to do that? Why does everybody think that I'll do all this all the time? But we don't actually say, sorry, I can't do that right now. We do it, we say yes when we want to say no, but then we end up being passive aggressive about it. We make excuses, we eye roll behind their back, we do all these kind of gestures, and we're not really having very much good self-care for ourselves, because we don't want to do it, let's say. Being assertive is saying to someone, if they ask us to do something, actually, I'd like to help you right now, but I don't have the time, or whatever. And it's having self-care, which there again, it's all about a mindset. It's having the mindset to do for yourself what you need in this moment in time. When we're aggressive, obviously, it's a very different energy. We're almost attacking someone. And this can come out even unknowingly at times. You know, somebody might ask us a simple question and we might just go, "Arr," because we may be so stuck in a story of everybody expects me to do this, I just get so angry. We can just come out in anger and seem like aggressive, and we may get a bad name as being an aggressive person, but it's just a story in us that's being rattled, a story in us that's been triggered. But there again, it's just stepping back, it's becoming assertive. Being assertive and becoming an assertive person is very empowering there as well, because we're looking at our relationship with our power, and we're allowing only ourselves to do what we need as an individual in order to overcome things like anxiety, and because we can become anxious if we're being asked to do too much, if we're having our power drained from us. You know, we can feel overwhelmed if we're stuck in our emotions all the time. So I think a way really to be clear is to look always internally at our stories, and how we deal with our power, how we give our power away, can really help us become clear in our mindset of going forward with whatever we want to do with our jobs. It's all this internal going inwards that's really going to open up for us the ability to go chase our dreams and to have whatever job it is we want. It may not be the most ideal one right now, but if we take one step in the right direction, all little steps in the right direction will ultimately lead us to the goal that we're looking for, and will help bring across this complete shift in our mindset, because that's all it needs is a shift. It's a change of perspective. It's looking at anxiety and realising I don't have to be anxious about this. I can look at the fear and I can do something about it. I can change the story myself. I can change my mindset around this. I can become more positive around it, and I can choose each day to come from this more positive energy. Now obviously we're all going to have days when we're not feeling as positive, and that's fine too, but as long as on most times we're looking for our work, for what we want to do, for our personal life, our work life, whatever, is always looking at the choice we have and looking at what is stopping us. And it's usually that inner saboteur, that inner critic that comes up and tells us we're not good enough or whatever. So I think that there are the 4 things I would tell people to look at: our emotions, our stress stories, our stories in general, like we tell us, our value systems, and our power story. Always ensuring that you are looking at these stories in a way that is more positive for you, and challenging the excuses you give yourself, because your excuses are your limiting beliefs that are limiting you. So, if anyone would like to comment or ask a question, I'm quite happy to take questions or anything. And if not, that's okay too. I hope that you've enjoyed that talk. I just love challenging people to just take a little different perspective on life. Okay, thank you.